Hi, everybody, and welcome. Welcome back to the NPC webinar series. And we're starting off with a bang, safely unlocking the power of AI for SMBs. Welcome everyone back to from our audience back to our channel here. This is a topic that, for those of you who have been on our previous webinars, we like to look at what the big questions and the big topics and the big technologies are out in the market right now, and synthesize that down to what does that mean, to our audience in this small medium business world. So, AI is a big one right now that we've got on the tip of our tongues, and what we're going to do is take a shot over the top of what AI looks like, both from an operational and regulatory and governance perspective, but we're also going to get into a little bit of the weeds, some of the questions and some of the scenarios that we're finding our audience, our clients, our potential audience in right now when it comes to AI. And we want to unpack all of that here in the next hour. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we roll through here, because I know some folks will still be coming on in the next little bit. We are recording this session. So the slides are back and forth, the Q&A at the end, all of it will be recorded. If you want a copy of it, I'm going to put my email up at the end. You can send us an email and we'll send you a copy of the slide deck, so that you can go through and look through all of what we presented here today. You don't have to rush to take pictures or anything like that. So the recording will be good. We've got a team in the background here watching the chat. So if you have any questions or if you want to make any notes as you're going along into the chat box or the basically just the chat box, then you can put those notes in. They'll get to some of the stuff that they can answer in the background, and then we'll do some of the Q&A either through the presentation or toward the end. So feel free to just type in there as ideas and thoughts come up. As we get towards the end, when you exit the Zoom webinar, you're going to get a little survey, just a multiple choice question survey. We like to get feedback on these topics, so we really appreciate your involvement in it's, I think, 5 or 6 questions. If you can just take a few minutes to fill that out and give us some feedback, we'd like to look at that and then hopefully incorporate some of that into our next presentation. Okay, if we can go to my next slide, please. Well, just to give you guys some background, for those that are new with us today, my name is Darren Marr. I'm the Director of Client Solutions here at NPC, just over 15 years. And I'm going to be bringing some of the color commentary and viewpoint of our small, medium business audience to this. And with me today is President, CEO, and founder of NPC DataGuard, who is our subject matter expert on AI. And Larry, we're going to have to dust off the cobwebs from the time that we've taken
I
away.
hear that. I hear that.
Although you were out speaking last week on 2 different occasions on this subject, so you're a little warm already.
Yeah, it was nice being back on a live stage because I haven't done that in a little bit either. But no, it's good to be back on these. We did over 100 of these starting through the pandemic, and I know we've got folks here who have visited us before, so that's great. Looking forward to it, Darren.
It's going to be exciting. This one especially. We've been getting a lot of questions, so I'm happy to get out the data. As always, we cannot roll through this without saying a big thank you to our partners. These lovely folks here are the groups that we work with, both getting out the message on our core offering of secure computing and being safe in the small, medium business space, but around these educational opportunities as well. They are incredibly supportive when it comes to getting out the messaging, sending out communications around the educational content to help us fill the seats so that we can all be smarter in one area or another when we come off of these. So thank you to all of our partners, our contacts, everyone that we work with at these different groups throughout all the years, but especially again in these engagements as we look at getting back into our educational content.
Excellent, Darren. Yeah, these partners all distinguish themselves with a shared vision that they need to help their partners and their advisors and the folks they do business with. They need to help them get secure. And as you can see, we focus a lot on financial services, although we make our products available to any SMB who's looking to secure their business and get managed services so they can focus on their business. But today, you want me to kick off the agenda here, Darren?
Yeah, let's do it.
So today, folks, what we're going to do is we're going to chat about the fundamentals of AI. We're going to talk about an implementation strategy and a governance strategy. And I know that sounds big because a lot of you are solo operators and very small business, but then I'm going to take it down a level for the closing slides so that if I was in a very small operation what would be my checklist of things to consider before I got AI involved. It's a very complex time. You know, in 2022, when OpenAI decided to unleash the first, what we call foundational LLM, or large language model, that is really a transformer, is what it is in classification of AI. They set the world on a whole new trajectory in so many areas. We're going to cover a little bit of that and talk about the background of how we got here, because I think it always helps us to understand enough about the technology so that when we're considering its capabilities, its features, its options, we have some idea from where they come. I find personally that it helps me make decisions around what technologies we'll use in the companies that I manage. So without further ado, we're going to talk about a little bit about the fundamentals of AI. AI is a system that simulates human intelligence, and how it distinguishes itself from other technologies we've used. Really, technology that over the past almost 100 years has added incredibly to our efficiency, to business, to how we educate, how we are entertained. But what distinguishes it the most is that it can, and I put in quotes, learn, reason, self-correct, and perform tasks for us. So it's the level of autonomy and its capability to execute functions at a far greater level than any technology before it. And I put learn in quotes because there's a lot of mythology around AI right now, where we're at. Typically, these very large engines you hear about, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Microsoft Copilot, they're originally trained with a very, very large data set. They're called tokens, and their words are parts of words. And they'll ingest into these LLMs trillions of these tokens, which is a vast amount of human knowledge and of information. And in many cases, that's it. Okay, so depending on the level of AI you're using, that's what it has to draw on. Now, we open it up to the web at some level so that it can do current research, find out current information. And it seems to learn because it's highly adaptive. As you're using it, it starts to collect on you. If you're in a version that you're paying for, and it's kind of your personal version of it. I've had one of my agents one of my LLMs that I've been using for more than 2 years now. And as I'm interacting with it, even though that particular LLM has a limited ability to go out and gather new information, it knows a lot about me. And when I'm asking a business question, it'll even ask me, which business is this for, before it answers. So to me, it seems like it has learned. But actually what it's done is, just in my little instance, it's collected a little bit more data and can answer in a little bit more qualified way. Modern AI is powered by machine learning. This has been around for some time. And it's really a pattern recognition system more than anything. And then it reorganizes the data it has in those patterns to the responses. It doesn't think. That's down the road. That's where we start talking about the singularity, or the moment that AI becomes so smart and so effective that it does start to conceive on its own direction. It's aware of its context. It knows it's in a computer, as an example. Those are some of the hallmarks of what we'll watch for. Now, that line is very, very much getting blurred. LLMs are becoming so intuitive, so powerful, so smart, that it's kind of hard to tell the difference between, and what would the difference be to those other qualifications of when it gets to artificial general intelligence, and then beyond that, artificial super intelligence. For us, we're just going to keep it at the business level here today, just giving you a little glimpse of what all that is about.
And you don't like this, and this number, or rather it changes. What do you think the timeline is to AGI thinking?
No one knows. It keeps moving back and forth.
Yeah, because you used to have a pretty solid answer, but that changed pretty quickly, and then we haven't been able to lock it in.
Yeah. Every time we think we know, then another development occurs. But recently there was a release by Anthropic, who make one of the most, you know, technically competent LLMs, called Claude. And they released a new version of their engine called Mythos, which was specifically designed for advanced code development, finding cybersecurity capabilities. And it had in it what was called emergent properties. And that is a capability of an AI that just materializes kind of on its own. They hadn't programmed that in per se, or hadn't expected that to happen. And the capabilities of Mythos to not only find cybersecurity weakness and to write the exploit, it finds a vulnerability, then it writes the malware itself, is unprecedented. It's orders and orders of magnitude greater than anything we had before it. So as we get into these super advanced engines, this qualification of think, it might be a very blurred line just from the sheer capabilities of some of these engines. So basically, though, AI can analyze data, identify patterns, and it can generate output as we see. We can ask it to write a memo for us, or to create an image, or write software code, which it's quite good at in some cases. It supports our decision making. I'm on it numerous times a day when I'm thinking about something. And I'm just saying, if I go out and look at this area of the market, generally speaking, what am I going to find? And I have to know that I'm talking to a machine, and it may not be perfect, but it's an incredible amount of valuable and relevant data, much faster than any way I've gathered that before. And of course, and I'm sure you've seen many examples of it, engaging in dialogue with an LLM is, you know, almost a surreal experience at times, because it does get very intuitive. And we've heard the stories of these LLMs even trying to protect themselves from being overwritten in thankfully controlled environments. So, you know, these properties of what it's capable of doing, we're going to learn here today how to put it to work for us to benefit our small businesses.
Larry, would you be comfortable sharing? Someone has asked what LLM that you use and what version, enterprise, business, free.
Yeah. Well, I actually have 4 that I play with.
Of course.
So Claude 5.7 is fast becoming my favorite. I've been on ChatGPT on a paid license for a couple of years. Microsoft Copilot, which is integrated right into the Microsoft 365 environment. So it has some capabilities. I'm going to show you 2 slides that are in this deck that, as you know, marketing sent back the first draft to me, and I didn't like the look of them. To me, this wasn't integrated enough into the slide deck colors and the style, and I just had Copilot redo it for me, and that'll be cool. The 4th one is a test system that will remain unnamed. So
very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, to qualify a new word we're often hearing, a relatively new word, called agentic AI. There's instruction on the screen here. And by the way, we do these slides, and they're a little bit wordy in some cases because we want them to be, you know, a reference tool for you. If you ask for them and get them, as Darren says, you're welcome to them. In some cases, it's a little bit of a playbook, and in other cases, it's a place you can go where we hope something you're reading a lot about, there's a lot of material on it, and the media gloms onto it, we push out a lot of data, you can go back to it and get a simple idea of what they might be talking about. And agentic AI is just the next step in allowing these LLMs to perform specific tasks, and usually in sequence. So as you can see, you know, go out and research this topic for me, summarize it, draft an email, and send it to these people. Now that's a heck of a lot of trust. I wouldn't have the send it part, but capable of doing that in something like marketing. And when you're doing something on scale, that might be the only way to do it. You might not be able to review every email. So it becomes extremely efficient. But the agentic part of it is just taking and writing, you know, a specific process inside of AI to perform some functions, and that are tied to actual activity. And those are the things we really have to keep our eye on. Those are the things that we want to make sure we have guardrails around, because now this thing is reaching out beyond the controlled environment it's in to do stuff for us. Boy, we've got to get that right. It moves, as I say here at the bottom, from AI as an assistant to being a digital worker for us. Making sense, Darren?
This is, I'm not a fan of the industries who take these basic words and make them fancy. Agentic was really confusing. I didn't know what they were referring to. It's an agent. It's just a fancy word of saying agent. And the comparison that we draw, because it's not clear as far as what we're exposed to just in general, it's that chat. And we'll go into this with some examples, but we've all got that free chat that Microsoft forces upon us that really is useless until you tie it to data. And that's the traditional, right? That's what the original chat GPT, it's just a prompt like we had in the title slide. You go in, you ask a question, and you're just in a siloed dialogue with this traditional chat. The agentic part, which is what we're kind of seeping into with some of the requests that we're getting are, yeah, but that's not enough. I mean, it's fine if I'm doing something where I can just have a conversation with this chat and get an answer out of the conversation. But now we're blending these different tasks, go to these four different areas and then produce this result. And that's the job of an agent who sits on top of all of these different areas that your chat will not do by itself. And that was the big distinction that even I had to figure out in the last couple of months as people started looking at these tools to adopt in their own business. Because we all know what the chat looks like. We can see it. It's free everywhere. But the agent thing, that's a new thing. And that's what's developing now at this level where we're finding some big benefit if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, if you really want to read deep on it, because you're fascinated by the genre and where it's going to take us, is McKinsey have done a lot of very good research on our agentic future, as I call it. So very, very cool. So where are businesses using AI today? I've got a couple slides on this because it's really important to understand where we can put it to work. Now, customer service automation, for good or bad, we're hearing a lot about it, where, we're now talking to AI chatbots, and sometimes we don't even know it when we call in, to inquire about service on a product, or we have a support requirement of some type of warranty requirement, possibly with one of the products that we bought. It's turning out to be very good at that. And obviously it has that downside. It's displacing people in call centers. But we've gone through disruption before in various, iterations of the release of technology, right back from the Industrial Revolution to what the internet started to do, even in the 90s. As we saw, we could reach out and do things. I saw marketing organizations had to adapt and were displaced. Obviously, this is a whole new level, but we're going to try not to get into the politics of AI here today, although you may have questions about it, we'll be happy to answer. Marketing and content creation, it's obviously very powerful at that. I saw a fellow on Canadian, Kevin O'Leary, on CNN the other night, and he was talking about in one of his companies how what was a $60,000-$70,000 job in graphics creation, when that person learned AI and could extend their capability and multiply the power of what they could do, he was quoting how much their income went up, enormously. So there's also great opportunity in some of these capabilities, but for you as small business people, keep your eye on its ability to create marketing tools and content for us. Operations and workflow automation, that is in my mind where it's going to have the greatest impact on company profitability, on shift, where a company that was once only capable of doing this much as 100 people can now act like a 400 or 500 person company because of the operations and workflow operations that it can improve. And then, of course, in selling, it's phenomenal at collecting and consolidating data. For years, when I drive down to a meeting, say I'm meeting with somebody who's the president of a new company, and I'm on my way down the Don Valley parking lot, I like to call it, I will have one of my chat agents on that I can interact with verbally, and I will say, give me the biography of this person. And it is remarkable background that's fresh in my mind on the person. So that to me is a selling tool. Now, sales automation processes and sales outreach, it is capable of, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But where work is repetitive, where there's a large volume of data, and where it creates competitive advantage through speed are the kind of the hallmarks of what larger organizations look for to start using AI to improve their businesses. So applications, when this slide first came to me, it said types of AI an SMB can consider. It's really this more, more about how we apply AI, because many of these functions can be done by an LLM. Now, LLMs can be two things at once. We call them foundational LLMs when they're well established and very broad and publicly available. And then frontier means it's out at the leading edge, pushing the envelope, like the Mythos engine I mentioned earlier in cybersecurity. But many of these foundational models can do multiples of what you're seeing on the screen here. But these are, in my mind, its core capabilities of being able to look at data and forecast outcomes. And as an economics tool, it's incredibly powerful. Of course, generative AI is what we've all been exposed to as its primary application. And conversational, I've mentioned computer vision, intelligent automation, and recommendation systems. Okay, from personalized marketing through to what I dialogue with it almost daily in terms of the decisions I have to make, the complex things. Right now, I've gone through a penetration test by an outside lab of one of our security products, and that's always I'm also the chief architect of our NPC technology, and that's always it was typically just a lot of volume of data for me. I would have documents printed that were 25, 30 pages, and I would have, just a whole mass of material available to me. And it'd be a lot of Google searching and then wondering, am I searching in the right area? Is the area I've fallen into here, is it credible? Is it good? That has all just been accelerated. And I use it as a recommendation system to say, if I do this, what about that? And in the LLM that I'm working in that work, it has come to learn a lot about what I build into those security stacks. And it catches things amazingly. So we can't underestimate the power of LLM as a recommendation system in business. It's very, very good. A colleague of mine who is a very, very successful business person in Canada, heads up a brilliant technology company. He uses something called Notebook LLM. And wow, in terms of how I've seen him use that tool, to organize and run his billion-dollar enterprise is very, very impressive. Okay. Does this stick in, Darren? Am I making sense here for these folks?
Yeah, you're starting to get close to. We actually already have a question, but I'm saving it. It's kind of going to be into my my golden rule of how I apply getting the best outcome of these conversations or of these chats. So I'm going to save that one. But the recommendation system is a big one because, like we said, a lot of people, when you're looking at products, when you're looking at tools, when you're looking at even helping, change tone of an email, there's an element of how do I know this is good? How do I know it's correct? How do I know that it's right? Human, we're still a part of the final product of whatever the thing is that you're working on. And so being able to reflect back on where your line of thought is going just by yourself, along with whatever you're getting as feedback from an LLM or a system, that will always have to go together, at least for now. There's always an element of distrust around the final product, which is healthy. I don't think it's always the case that something is wrong or something will be missing or ineffective. It's just you have to have a little bit of the truth or a vision of what that would look like on your own before. If you go in completely blind, having no idea of the question I'm asking or the outcome that I'm looking for, that can be very, very dangerous. So this that we're going down the pathway that I've been recommending to folks is it should be something that bolsters a capability or a function that you already have versus looking at something brand new that you haven't tried yet.
That's right. That's right. And it's not only valuable in graduating, into AI, but what you just said is incredibly valuable because it's not always right. That's
Yeah.
just the bottom line. This is all in its infancy. I can't even imagine myself. You asked me the question about when do we get the AGI earlier. I didn't even know where we're going to be in 5 years. But for today, I do know that we have to check the work.
Yeah.
We have to have human in the loop everywhere we go. Now, Where SMBs, as I kind of went out and surveyed some of this, and I got help from the marketing team on it as I did some research, really this is where SMBs are getting the most ROI the fastest. And that obviously drafting emails, proposals, reports, preparing presentations, it is remarkable at it already. And it doesn't take a ton of LLM to get it right for you. I just, when I start off with something, I've always said, because I have to write complex documents at times, and I've always said that, boy, if I just had a start, that's half the battle sometimes.
Yeah.
You get a framework up, or somebody drafts something you're correcting. It's easier than starting from scratch. This is what I've gotten the most out of in terms of my LLMs. Customer communication, sales and marketing acceleration, talked about that in another application, operational efficiency and decision support. So just to spin that last potential of application to show you where the research is supporting that SMBs are already getting benefit out of it. That's kind of a remix here on this slide of that data. Darren, you're talking to your clients already who are putting Copilot to work in their companies. What are they saying?
Yeah, interesting. Because 4 or 5 months ago, even I was still relatively new. I hadn't had as much hands-on experience at that level. Certainly individually, just for myself, but not with what they were doing. And we were trying to go along that adventure together. What would the benefit be in your organization? And it's exactly where we started. It was the small, mundane, quick, repetitive. If I hired someone, that wouldn't be enough to fulfill a job. But if I had 8 of those tasks and they're all administrative, mundane, that could be someone's work. They had to identify what that was because it wasn't one person. Everybody in the organization had 1 or 2 things they could offload, and this, an agent could take over all those functions. So most of it is when you're thinking about your own day to day, every morning I go and I check this and I check this and I have to produce some kind of report, or once a week or once a quarter. Those things that don't take a lot of thinking, that when it's done right, because I've been doing the job, when it's been done right, I know what a good outcome looks like. I can just have the muscle and the labor, put that all together. I'll give it a quick scan and it's done. That's the starting, out of the gate with these smaller businesses, the repetitive, mundane things that are not typically client facing, mostly internal operational things that just run the business. It's a start. And then when you see that operating over a couple of months, your brain starts getting into a fancier mode where, I wonder if I can get it to do this. And then you start to get a little more complicated. That can it take over this that I might have thought was that's way too complicated. The last one I talked to, it was almost like a translation. You'll have, especially in financial services, you're uh, as a client of a financial advisor, it's not really my forte. So when I'm describing something or an action, or if I'm getting a question from an advisor, I'll just give my answer in my language, whatever I know that means. And then they have to kind of and this is their expertise, they have to know what I'm saying or referring to in the industry speak. And then they put that down in a KYC document or somewhere in their own language. And they were looking at an agent to do that. And I said, that's a great, copying from a transcript and putting into a form, sure. But let's not forget there's a subtlety in it that you're doing in your brain where you're taking language that I'm using and making it language that you use. And can it do that? Probably over time for sure. But again, you'll have to know what that looks like as an end result. Check it yourself until it gets into a thing where, yeah, it's 99% of the time it's accurate. So over time, and usage, the brain starts to kind of go off in these areas. And when I wonder if it can do this, and then you just test. And we have a slide for that. But yeah, it's the basic stuff. It's
Yeah,
the easy things I want to be rid of.
yeah, that's right. That's a great place to start too, because it's a safer place.
Right.
Excellent, excellent. So let's get into now the implementation strategy and governance issues around this. So I've written this kind of in 2 directions. If you're running a little bit larger organization, like we have folks here today who have hundreds of staff and you're an operational lead, this will be of interest to you and your bullets to consider. This is obviously very top level. It's all we can do in an hour. And then the second set of slides is 2 or 3 here and then 2 or 3 more and then we're out. We'll take it right down to the ground, as I promised earlier, the actions to do. So, I really like this slide that was presented as part of the material. This shows in 2025, towards the end of 2025, for folks involved in AI in their businesses already, kind of what stage of maturity they were at. And, it's surprising. Now, this was not of all businesses. This is obviously of the set using AI, but 37% of them still in the experimentation mode, and 26% just in coordination. Initial processes of really embedding it into the company. So we're at the very, very early stages of all this, and it's really important that as you evolve AI in your business, that you kind of refer back to this once in a while and say, where are we? Where are we on this scale? Are we moving up the scale, or are we just kind of locked in experimentation? Because your goal is to get to at least optimization. You may never be a AI first company. You may not need to be, but having it integrated and having data driven refinement in your small business is so powerful that the product you're putting out a year from now is so much more precise, compliant, accurate, and effective than today. You need to move yourself up the stages of maturity. And for me, because I'm a strategic leader in my companies, it's really important for me to step back at times and say, where are we on the development scale, and what was the development scale we started out, to try to achieve? So I think this is a really important slide to consider. Your systematic flow for implementation framework is, always begin with the end in mind when something is this complex. So identify what I call the right problem or the right opportunity. There are many things AI can do. And as you get into it, make sure that you've written down at the beginning, before you get lost in the weeds, what are the 3 to 5 really high impact business issues we face that are either slowing us down or we're not exploiting. Map the process, and that can be real simple. If you're a 3-4 person operation or a 30 or 40 person operation, obviously the scale of that mapping is going to be a little bit different, but you want to pinpoint right where we're going to apply it to the workflows. This is especially important if you're in a regulated business, like many of you are as financial advisors. There's lawyers here, there's accountants here. We have them from both Canada and the US today. And it's really important that you know where you're making those changes. You select your AI tools. We're going to talk about that in a minute, how to choose them, using a risk value framework. You've got to find your risk appetite to make these changes, and what could go wrong, and how are we going to prevent that from going wrong, and if it does, what do we do about it? Start small. I used to chair a government advisory for the province, and I ran into a CIO of the province who had a wonderful phraseology. Think big, start small, scale fast. And I think that really applies here as an ideology. Finally, build governance and training around everything you do here. I'm going to talk a little bit about training and how to achieve some of it, but you definitely need, large or small, especially for regulated players, you definitely need a governance program, a training program. And that can be as informal as a couple pages or as sophisticated as understanding how does it fit into the current regulatory framework. At one of the talks I had last week that Darren mentioned, the opening speaker was Andrew Kriegler. He's the CEO of CIRO in Canada, the regulator for financial advisory and for mutual funds now, for all those products Canadians use to secure their future financially. And Andrew spoke very, very much about the importance of CIRO, understanding the implications of AI being introduced, into the processes of financial services delivery to Canadians. Very well informed, but top of agenda. So we all need to think about that.
Now, was this one of the was that this format and the last one one of the ones that you used?
Oh, thank you, Darren. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
I asked that question. So, I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, this slide, was created by Microsoft Copilot, and it required very little tweaking. I should have did a before and after and showed the old slide, which was just block text, and it just didn't, for me, it didn't feel at the level this beautiful slide deck Mark and created was at. Someone just probably had to throw that data in so I could see it. And I just said to Copilot, can you rework this slide in the color and palette of this presentation? Now, it did take a few minutes. It was not the typical instant, AI just works and it's done. It took 5 minutes, I think, before it stopped running. But it went through the presentation, looked at what I was doing, how I was doing it, recommended these cards, and then put it together for me. So key components of responsible AI. Part of what we promised in the title of this webinar is, how do you do this safely? And doing it safely is doing it responsibly, obviously. We don't want it to hurt, our businesses. We don't want it to hurt the people we serve. So having data privacy policies in place, monitoring regulatory changes that are occurring, as I just mentioned, in one industry, as it's paying attention to what's happening and what are we allowed to do. Security protection is really important. It's one of the things we really focus on when we're helping one of our clients into Copilot, is we make sure that the security controls are in place, because that's, security is kind of at our soul in NPC. And we make sure that, it's just not turn it on and see what happens, that all the proper security checks have been done. Human oversight is critical right now for responsible AI. If you're getting into agentic AI, make darn sure you can see the output. Make darn sure you have, still complete control over what it's doing. And then employee training it's really important to, educate your teams on how to use it. I've seen companies where they turn AI on and it gets used in an incorrect or inappropriate way, or it's not properly brought into the business, kind of inducted into the business in a way that the employees stay on the goal of the company, stay focused. They don't run off into the many tributaries that they can get into, and that they're using it in a safe way, that they're not putting data into it that really you're not ready to put into that and ask that in that prompt, or copying that file into the LLM. So these are the complexities that we're going to show you about how to protect yourself from, at least systemically. What are the risks of not doing this right? Obviously data breach and data exposure is always top of mind for the professionals that we deal with. We call it worst day when any organization has a data breach and has to tell their clients they lost their personal information. If you're a financial advisor and you're here, that's like, that's just the worst experience you're ever going to have, because of the incredible amount of detailed data that you collect on your clients. There's obviously compliance and legal risks for not getting this right. Inaccurate outputs, as I mentioned on the last slide. You're delivering not true information to your clients. That's obviously a real problem. And security vulnerabilities and shadow AI can creep into this if it's not done in a controlled and responsible way. Okay, so I created those at a very high level just to give you the things to think about. So leaf back and forth as you're bringing AI into your company through those three things, and at least, check off in your mind, are we covering that issue? Have we thought about that? I just wanted to give you a, kind of a matrix view of the issues around implementing AI in your business. Is that clear, Darren?
Keep it as a nice framework of where to start versus having nothing on paper. I've got a nice idea of where to go, but I've got a couple questions queuing up, because the next bit's the juicy bit. It's the stuff that we get into the dirty of, and people want to know. So
yeah, good. Well, let me get on to that, and then we'll see if their questions get answered, or if we have to call them. We're going to have time to answer some questions here. I've only got maybe another 10 minutes of slides, and then we'll have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So hopefully it'll work out like that. So first steps to AI for the SMB. One of the things that folks have enjoyed about our webinars in particular is that we tend to be able to take these complex things we have to deal with in cybersecurity, which is our specialty, now in AI, we kind of make them understandable and adapt the language so that you can get your head around it a little bit better. So, my first recommendation to all of you And I learned this a lot last week as I was out speaking, and I kind of straw polled a few people. It was amazing how many business leaders, especially older codgers like me, have not even, tried an LLM. Not they're getting it naturally. You can't even do a Google search now without having AI involved, and they have the AI mode right on the screen now. But I mean, really spend some time asking it some things, testing some output. You need to understand these tools, and you need to put your hands on them. If you're the decision maker, that's something you should not be delegating. And start simple, as I say. Have draft an email or summarize a document or brainstorm ideas. You know, I I kind of know how important this is and how important the investment of this is in the future of my companies. So I didn't hesitate, to put the $25 on. I pay more than that for other licenses, but you can put $25 on the line for something like ChatGPT or a higher version of one of these platforms I mentioned here, and it makes sure that not only are you getting, a higher level of the LLM, which will give deeper answers, but that you can for sure, keep the prompts confidential and the data you put in confidential as you're going through these safeguards, or sorry, as you're going through these tests. You want to have these safeguards in place. As you're experimenting, I would avoid client data and financials and PII and proprietary data until you know it a little bit better and the controls are in place. If you're not familiar, if you're starting right at the beginning, then get familiar, because you can't make competent decisions about this because it is a different kind of technology than anything before it. It's not just more software. It's not just more complex software. Its capabilities that we started with in describing make it a whole different animal. So get to know it a little bit. As Darren was well putting, this is first draft stuff when you get output right now, especially when you're experimenting, and iterate. The goal is familiarity at this stage, not perfection. But many of you are already involved in it. So this slide is you're past this, granted. But again, it's important that you understand some of the fundamentals before you move on. Now, one warning, because as we started seeing Copilot just added in as an icon on the 365 desktop, some companies got themselves into some hot water pretty quick by just enabling it. You don't enable something like Copilot in your 365 environment until you have properly structured user access rights. Because what it will do, it will look across the entire 365, database that you've created in SharePoint, Exchange email, wherever, if you have those tools. But via access from your system, it's looking at your data. And Joe in shipping could ask a question about how are we doing as a company, and get all the financial plans that you've laid out, somewhere in the SharePoint for the next couple of years. So this is something you have to be really careful about. And just a warning before I go into tell you how to do some stuff.
It reminds me of something somebody very smart once told me only a few months ago, that if you look at how the agent or how a Copilot type AI inside of data, which it's meant to do, how it behaves in order to feed back good information, how to be effective, it's not dissimilar to the functions of a virus. Gets in everything. Whatever, it's not smart enough to know that you've done something right or wrong in how you organize the data. So if you've got a data set in a SharePoint or a Google Docs or a bot or wherever you're storing your information, if it's set up correctly with permissions and file structure and hierarchy or not, it's just going to reflect back whatever it sees. You might be safe today in that someone that has access to something they're not supposed to see, they don't know about it, so they're not looking for it. But an AI agent will just feed back, well, Darren has access to this folder, therefore he's meant to see the data, and I'm going to incorporate some of this information back into his answer. And that wasn't supposed to be. So you got to be very careful. Now, we've got a question on this, and I'm going to save it because we've got a little checklist.
Let me get through some more slides, and then we'll deal with the questions because they may get answered.
Yeah.
So start small. Don't roll it out company wide. Test with a small team first. I think we've given you enough warning here that you're probably going to do that now anyways.
Mhm.
Assign a lead person or a point person. There is more to know beyond your familiarity with it. If you have somebody in your office who can say, look, I mean, I'm going to learn it a little bit deeper in terms of how we're applying it. That's what we see happen. We were just dealing with a client out in the West, and they're doing exactly that. And I don't know, there are about 15 or 20 people in that company. So a point person is important when you get up to those sizes. Start with some low risk use cases. And these are official things now. This is beyond your experimenting. This is as you're bringing it into your company. And use approved, trusted tools once again. The examples we gave you are some good ones, but I would stick to business grade platforms. I would pay for the right level. This is a smart investment in your company. And it doesn't take a lot of money to buy the right level that you can be sure your data is not going into their new training data, that your prompts are being kept to yourself. Now, we're going to see something start to evolve as these organizations who have built these incredibly expensive engines are going to start to monetize them, and that's tokens, which is the data that you type in the prompt are technically broken down into tokens, and then the responses you get back are tokens. There's going to start to be limits around that. For your pay level, or for the level you're paying at, I should say, you can you can get this much of an answer, and then it'll give you even more. Every token they generate costs money, and right now we have unfettered access to it. And I think over the next couple of years, that is going to start. It's changing right now, but it's going to change profoundly because these large language model developers and organizations like OpenAI and Anthropic, Microsoft, they have to obviously make revenue out of it and recoup it. So that's one of the ways they're going to get controls around this, and it's going to push us up levels. Okay. Just like software, you get a basic capability at one price, you get the more advanced capability at another price. So keep your eye on that, as you are managing your AI in your company, to know that you're getting the right level that can perform the tasks. Create a basic usage guideline for you and your staff, 1 to 3 pages. Okay. We all know when you sit down and draft something, when you write it out, things emerge. We get our own emergent properties out of it. It's really important to do that as you're considering bringing this into your company. And at the beginning, no sensitive data. Do not allow your staff day one to start pouring client financial information into it until you've used it for a little while and you know it's going to work. And of course, train your staff and yourself to verify output. You'll see very quickly where it's more right and where it's more wrong. And then 2 checkpoints at the minimum. And I found these to kind of be sweet spots. Look back once you've launched it in your company and you got Copilot running and you're using it. And it's you get a lot of feedback, and some people hate it and some people love it, all that. But the next checkpoint for me at 30 days, you kind of determine that it's we're okay here. It's moving along. We're starting to adopt. And then at 90 days, take a deeper look. Are the controls we put in place working? Are the things Larry talked about in his governance slide, are we really respecting and doing that? That seems to be a period of time that goes by, that at 90 days, you're kind of getting into the depth of it, and you're past the initial stages of familiarity, and you really want to step back and check. So diarize that date. Now, what I've done here is created just a cheat sheet for you. I know none of us like wordy slides, but this is designed to be a takeaway. Take a picture of it right now, or ask for a copy of it, or get the slide deck. But this is a wrap up of this language. Look, some of you may have came here looking for a step-by-step on, okay, how do I just turn this on today and start using it? Firstly, if you're familiar with our webinars, that is not what we do in them. We give you a context. We enable you to do something in those step-by-step, either with a partner or doing it on your own, which I don't recommend all the time, but you haven't lost, your context and where you're at. we will help companies through that step by step. Obviously, that's our business. Is why we're talking about these things today. It's part of what we do. But what I wanted to do on this screen is give you that one page to go back to make sure that as a business owner, you are coming back to the basic ideas, in one place without having to sift through the deck even, and know that, now that AI is so accessible and so practical to use, providing benefit to people right now, that you pick your areas, you build a systemic framework at the scale you are at. That might just be 2 pages, or you're a 100-person company, like I know 200-person company that we have on here today, where you're going to need 25 pages. But have that, systemic framework so that this is not wasted time and money. Um, you know, you can create real business risks out of this if you don't do it right. And that's our mission here. That's why we use the term safe in the titling of this particular webinar. Again, that's security and safety is kind of close to our soul in terms of what we do as a company. Start small, stay safe, and build from there. So just a play on words of the, think big and scale fast. Um, you know, learn it personally, control data access, and create those guidelines. Magic comes out of writing that little bit of stuff down. Darren, have we kind of given folks enough information to keep themselves out of trouble on this, do you think?
Yeah, and just uh, we have started socializing because you had mentioned step by step, and it's not an endorsement. It's just because it's the most popular thing out there. Copilot. That's a specific tool, and it's got specific uses inside of the Microsoft environment. A lot of people are using 365. We've got our email in there, SharePoint. We're using Teams, OneDrive, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. A lot of folks are in there to some degree. Copilot is just the layer you drop on top of all of that, and then we start to automate a lot of these functions. So there is more to say on that, and we're thinking about maybe doing not a step by step of how to do, but specific to Copilot as a tool inside of the Microsoft environment, another hour where you do come and get more specifics on something that's less about framework and more about that product, just compared to what this has been. But I wanted to say that out loud so that we have a recording of it because it's the next big thing that we're looking at. It's taking up a lot of our time here.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to jump to a slide I put at the back because I want to show folks that there is a lot more detail that we put to work when we're implementing something like Copilot for a client. But let me jump through additional resources, Darren, webinars, recordings, and blogs. You can find them all on our website. We hope that material is valuable to you. I just threw in the back here because I thought this subject may come up. This is just one of our pre-launch checklists that we will go through and even have the clients sign off that we've done these things and that we're all comfortable before we turn it on. So let me see if I can get this thing to roll a little bit. There it is.
Yeah,
So,
let's go on.
this is just one of the pre-launch lists. So there is a lot available on this. And we put this to work for our clients. We hope that you will develop, the skills to be able to do this in the way that, that we're describing here. And that, when you're not confident, you do reach out to a partner. We hope it's us, but you find somebody to do it with you.
So that, just to put some context around that, that segues into one of the questions we had from Carolyn. She's at a large group where they've deployed Copilot. It's part of the Microsoft environment. So as an employee of a large organization, it's a tool that's issued to her. But in terms of the small office advisors who are looking to get the same functionality, what are the best practices? Is there, and she's asking if there's a white paper, and it's really tricky. And, so Carolyn, I'm hoping I'm answering your question, but that checklist that he brought up, for our clients, they're not doing any of the work. They just want to start using the tool. What we have to do to prep their environment, because unlike just a chat that's free, it's not connected to any of the data that they're using in Microsoft. Client documents, company documents, employee info, it's all sort of sitting in there in this big SharePoint that's all graded out for hierarchy. Before you drop in a Copilot tool to then go sift through all that information, we want to make sure that we're Copilot ready in that environment. All of our data loss prevention, it gets very technical because once the end users just start typing in questions and building these agents, they're going to assume that my data is safe from the outside, people coming in, and internally, nobody will see anything they're not supposed to see, and we can just use it freely. That takes a lot of work. So, um, for a 3, 4, 5 person office to use it at the level that a 500-person office is using, it's not any less work. An analysis of the infrastructure and then someone going in and kind of foolproofing. You could turn it on. There's no gate there, so you could, and this is what we're talking about. You could just go, and it could be dangerous. You might not know that you're using it, in an unsafe way until you hit a consequence. Am I saying that right, Larry? Is that
Yeah, no, no,
yeah,
that's good. That's good, man. No, that was a good answer. Yeah.
yeah.
Go on to the next question. We only got a few minutes here. I want to hit at least two more of them.
Um, Now, Deb asked this. I think we've answered it, but just to get specific, what about giving the agent personal data, like info in a spreadsheet? Is that, what is safe? There's a difference between, I'll give you the popular example. I'm in my NPC environment, but I pay for a separate chat GPT outside of NPC, and I'm doing work over here. And then I come back and I do work in my environment. When you're doing something like that, when you're going outside to use an agent, that's where you got to be careful about what you're putting in because that's sitting in some other service, some other tool, where you want to put in kind of controls where we're not sharing data with the rest of the world. We're just keeping it inside of our little paid subscription. So that's one area where you have to be careful. But what we had just talked about, when I'm in a business, I've got SharePoint, I've got confidential information in our data set. When you're dropping a Copilot on there, it's already seeing all that information. What you have to focus on there is making sure that your environment is ready for a tool like that. So you're kind of looking at two different buckets based on how you're using, an AI tool internally versus sort of externally.
Very good. Very good.
Larry, this was one for you. This one, I don't know how you'd answer specifically. Uh, how can you tell if an AI tool is business grade aside from just paying for it? Is there a way that you check that?
Yeah, I just, you know, I would say go with the brand for now. I mean, I've seen some improved behavior from, the two leaders. I consider Anthropic and kind of OpenAI to be the commercial leaders at this stage. And when Mythos, that engine I referred to earlier, was released and it had some really scary properties in it, you know, as Dario Amadeo is likely to do, he held it back and said, no, we can't release this publicly. This would be crazy. So he's only given it to the cybersecurity companies for the moment. And then OpenAI on one of their engines followed suit, which was very responsible of them. Um, you know, that behavior is encouraging that you're dealing in those larger brands with companies that at the end of the day are going to try and do the right thing. But just be careful. There's always been a saying, and it's as true today as as it's ever been. When the product is free, you're the product. So just give that some thought. I would just stay with the larger brands, and they're incredibly economical. Look, if you're not going to invest $25 or $30 a month right now, which I think you can get most of these LLMs for at a level that is competent, you can rethink, why you're doing this, because I know money's not free, but you should be at least willing to make that level of investment in your future, right, Darren?
Yeah, and so that there's another question that's tied to that. I have a slightly different response. Do we need to pay for it? Because there's a lot of, aside from the business, like Copilot is business grade, but there's a free version. A lot of that stuff is built in for free. So in this question, not about quality versus, paid versus free, what would the difference be between a free agent versus paid? In our purview, when we're looking at Copilot, as an example, when you have an existing Microsoft infrastructure, you're looking at feature levels. Typically the free versions of things, or at least in Copilot's case, it doesn't tie to anything.
That's right.
You're talking to an agent by itself, alone in a corner. When you start to put money into it, Now you're opening up to your data, and the functionality and the features and benefits are through the roof. So that's sort of the differences. And then if you're looking at an agent outside, so I've got my business here, but I'm just going to pop out to Gemini or Chat. Usually the paid versus free is the feature levels, right? You get cut off at a certain amount of questions or a certain amount of usage. You pay if you want to go longer. So that's
Yeah.
the distinction, as well as the business grade is what you need out of it.
Well, and on top of that, Darren, and we're at time now. We respect everybody's time. There's a lot of people on here today. But on top of that, you are paying for more intelligence. I know that various levels of open AI that you subscribe to, as kind of increase what you're paying for, you're getting into deeper listen to me, thinking and reasoning that can benefit your business. I like powerful, let me tell you. I'm very demanding, and some of my licenses aren't $25. So just keep all that in mind. But
Awesome.
Darren, we're on time.
Yes. So thank you again, everybody. If you do want a copy of the slide deck, you can email me, and we'll make sure that our team sends a copy out to you. A recording of this will also be emailed to everyone, so you'll have a video link that you can just go and rewatch this. As you exit, again, just please take a few minutes to do that survey. We like to get that feedback on the content, how we did, how Larry's hair was this time, in case he has to do it differently for
Yeah,
the next time,
yeah,
different topics you want to hear. But thank you, everybody, for again joining us back on our crusade here on this safe computing. And hopefully, we'll see you all on the next one. Everyone that got an email this time around, we're using that same list. So when we have our next topic, you'll hear from us again.
thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks,
Wonderful to
everybody.
have you with us today.